So in this video, guys, I want to talk to you about how I actually go about planning where I'm going to next. So usually what happens is I pick a continent, and when I pick a continent, I end up grouping countries into it. And so first, before I create the group, I pick 2 or 3 main countries I want to visit in that continent, and then I group it together. So to give you an example, if I were to go to Africa, that'd be the continent, obviously. I'd pick, let's just say, South Africa, Kenya, let's just say I pick Zimbabwe. I'd look at what's around Zimbabwe within a 1 to 2 to 3 hour flight, or sometimes it's not even the cheapest, the time, it's the cheapest flight. And so what ends up happening from there is I will go and make a whole list of countries that's around Zimbabwe. I'll make a list of countries that's around South Africa, which is, obviously right by Zimbabwe. If you look at the map, it's about 4 hours, 3 hours, and that's close enough. And so then what ends up happening is that I end up looking at what is my main country that I want to go to. But then I look at what is my cheapest country to go to. Not necessarily in terms of food and stay, but as far as airfare, because airfare is usually going to be one of the most expensive things to your trip, other than the stay. And so if the airfare makes sense, where I'm saving a lot more money to go to South Africa than Zimbabwe, I'm going to South Africa, and then I'll check a flight from South Africa to Zimbabwe to make that happen, and I'll stay a couple days in both places. Now, let's just say it was cheaper to go to Kenya, and I mean flat out way cheaper. I will skip Zimbabwe, or I will skip South Africa, and I'll just go straight to Kenya, and maybe just to another country right around there. And so usually that's how I kind of plan things out. So I'll give you an example of my Europe one. When I was planning my whole Europe trip, I ended up picking London to be one of the cities I wanted to visit. Like, seriously, it was my #1 pick. Then outside of that, it was Italy. Then outside of that, it was probably the Netherlands. And when I ended up planning my first Euro trip, I had to skip London because I was going to spend an extra $100, $150, and I was trying to save money. So I ended up skipping London. I ended up flying into, let's just say, I think it was Turkey. And I stayed in Turkey a day or 2, and I ended up flying to Italy, which was still on my list, which was #2, but it wasn't #1, which is what I wanted to do, but skipped it. Then I ended up going to the Netherlands, which was, on the 3rd, and, got to explore. And although I didn't get to go to my #1 pick, I ended up still going to Europe and visiting countries that were on my bucket list that were amazing. And I got to save a couple $100 by not doing it, and I ended up going to London about 2 other times later that I went to Europe. So I didn't even get to go on my second time because it was still not the cheapest option. And so when you plan some of your travel, you need to plan according to your budget, obviously. And that's what I did right there with that. I skipped the country that I really wanted to and went to surrounding countries. Now, had I really wanted to, I could have went into one of those other countries and found a way to take a train, drive, or whatever to another country that I really wanted to get to. But, that's a bit too long. I'd rather just fly. So that's kind of how I plan my countries that I go to. So once again, to recap, I pick the continent, I pick my favorite places, and I group it, and then I look at the flights to see what is the cheapest option to get through, and if it's gonna work. So that's it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching, and hopefully you can actually apply some of this and start traveling more yourself.